Hello and welcome to the Rabblecast. My name is Eric Hernandez here along with
Doug.
and I'm trying to remember what number we're at. One of the problems when episodes get kind of like mixed up or delayed, or I'm trying to go through and edit different ones together. I'm like, oh fuck, what episode are we on at this point? So I'm just trying to.
624?
No, it can't be that one.
Oh,
Because
I know we're in the sixes.
yeah, you're oh, okay. You're just going off the top of your head.
Yeah.
Here we go.
Killing time on the podcast.
This would be episode number 629 because I still got to put up the other one still. So yes,
Okay.
there you go. Episode 629, where we talk about more Halloween movies. 31 movies and 31 nights or days, depending on how you track it. Again, the hashtag says nights, so I'm using that for the time being. Doug continues to give us his movie list, which is quite long. Be prepared, because once again, we run down the list of what he's already watched, and then he gives his commentary on all the different things that he... you okay there?
Yeah, I'm okay.
Don't die. We're almost there. Then he gives his commentary on the different films that he watched recently. And then at the very end, I give us a little history lesson, because I learned something after the last episode when we talked about Mischief Night, and we talk about the origins and how it's carried out in different regions. So that just fills out the episode in a sense. It's chock full of stuff, so be ready. Have fun. Listen and enjoy.
It's a Halloween treat.
There you go. We are brought to you by InsidePulse.com, where you can find us under the podcast section. You can also find us over at Rabblecast.libsyn.com. I know, because I just looked for the episode number. You could also check us out on YouTube, youtube.com/Rabblecast. Check out the Rabblecast Facebook fan page. Send us a tweet at Rabblecast. Email us, rabblecast@gmail.com. Stories, ideas, suggestions, feedback, especially Halloween lists for movies. Give us some of your favorites. And I think that's about it. Anything else, sir?
No, I think you covered all the kicks.
Sweet. All right, let's get into it. Enjoy the show. It's
Maybe that was
Thursday
12
night. What's that?
I think that was 12 seconds. Shit.
Probably. Let me try that again. It's Thursday night, and the feeling's right. Something, have some fun. I can't say it's TGIF because that's Friday. It's not Friday.
I was going to say, yeah, what the hell are you singing, man?
It's a cry for help, Doug. I just need to escape. How are you, sir?
I'm tired, frustrated, angry, and wondering what the hell to do with myself.
Yes, the human condition.
Yeah, effectively. Yeah.
Oh, boy. I have some good news. We'll start off with that real quick.
Suck it to me, baby.
I finally finished It Chapter 2,
Oh, all right.
and I feel slightly underwhelmed.
Really?
Yeah, you know what? I remember watching the original with Tim Curry as Pennywise, and I'm trying to recall how that one like ended all the way. Like I can go back and look it up, but I felt like that ending was kind of like anticlimactic a little bit. The way they take down Pennywise, especially the big giant spider form and the dead lights and everything else. It was cool, but the way it went down was just like really quick, to the point where I got to the last hour of Chapter 2, and maybe it was because I had to watch it in different sittings, on different nights, so maybe that played into it a little bit. But I felt once I got to the last hour, and I was waiting for the showdown, and I know the kids go back and they confront Pennywise and everything else, with the added CGI effects and everything else the way it was written, I felt like, all right, let's just get to it already. Let's get to the ending. And finally, when it happened, I'm like, that's it? Shit. They give you the happy ending. They give you the send off. I don't remember if the one character Eddie died in the original one, but
I don't remember either.
I was like, I vaguely remember them all surviving. One of them probably getting like critically injured, maybe. But when the spoilers for anybody who hasn't watched It Chapter 2 yet, when the house collapses in on itself, that where Pennywise was hiding in the sinkhole at the bottom or the well, I was just like, is the other kid coming out? Are they going to be able to salvage or save him? I don't know what's happening. And then finally they do like the little walk down the street, and they're having the flashbacks to when they were kids, and the Losers Club. And I'm like, okay, I guess. But it's funny because the one character of Bill in this version, they talk about he becomes an author, and nobody likes the way his movies end or his story or his books end. I was like, is this like a weird meta joke that Bill's endings kind of are like lackluster? Because that's what I feel like. But I don't know. I enjoyed it. A lot of cooler moments, obviously, because the added the effects and the CGI and what they can pull off nowadays. I don't know if it really helped in many places, because as you and I have talked about quite a few times, when you're doing CGI in a horror movie, there's something to be said about practical effects versus CGI effects.
Yes.
And this one definitely was walking a fine line between those in many different cases. Now, granted, Pennywise, the demon Pennywise, or whatever entity it was, it's not really described, but the effects helped. But just as much as they helped, it's like, oh, I know that's CGI. That's not terrifying. Like when his mouth misshapens and all the teeth come out and everything. I'm like, okay, that's cute. That looks good. CGI, good team, whatever studio who did that. But it doesn't terrify me as much as a practical effect, like the Demogorgon on Stranger Things, where they have the different things open up and the mouth is like quivering, and certain aspects are actual effects or practical effects, and other ones are CGI when they have to have it moving quicker. But I'm like, all right, it was fun, I guess. I'm glad I finally got up, the time and the courage to get to it and finish it. But I was like, all right, Pennywise is still a pretty badass character, but by the end of it, I'm like, all right, that's it. The good guys win. Yay.
That kind of sums up a lot of my feelings on the old one and even the new one were just, I was like, these were fine.
Now, did you read the book by chance?
No.
Because there was mention, I remember when we were growing up, that we watched the movie. Everything was fine when we watched the movie. Again, double VHS set if you were renting it. But near the end, and I chalk it up to possibly it just being Stephen King, where during the final confrontation, there's like some kind of like orgy that happens with the kids, in their grown-up state, I should say, where there's like a weird like sex scene, and I don't know if like they're hallucinating, whatever the case was, but I'm like, where does that settle in the whole storyline? I guess I have to read the book to get that. I don't know.
I think they just decided not to film it because I think the implication of that is that they're all underage. So they just were like, we're just not going to put this in the movie because this is just, a problem.
Have you watched Caligula?
Like 12, 13, whatever year olds fucking, that's just, Hollywood's like, let's not.
I mean, it would make sense why they have this bond. I've seen you naked, so have I. That kind of thing, I get it, but I don't know. Mm-hmm. It just seemed weird overall. I might be tempted to listen to the audiobook for it, just to get the other details that Stephen King cooked up. Him and his kooky writing. But overall, a lot of fun. So for anybody who's a fan of the old It with Tim Curry, trust me, you're not killing the old one. You're ruining my horror childhood. No, we're not doing that. It's just another different take, updated, more scenes, more story, kind of crazy. The one question I had was, whatever happened to the bully?
I don't know.
Because at one point, I believe his name was Bowers.
Something like that.
He was the bully when they were kids, right. And later in their adult lives, he's committed to some like insane asylum or some psychiatric hospital. Pennywise helps free him, and then he goes out there and he puts the idea in his head, you have to kill them all. He starts tracking down the kids. He comes across the one kid, stabs the kid in the side of the mouth.
Hmm.
which was kind of like a what the fuck moment. But as the one kid's trying to hide behind the shower curtain, he pulls the knife out of his face, and as Barris is going after him, he stabs him through the shower curtain, and he doesn't see it. But Barris pulls the knife out of himself, and then runs off. And I don't remember seeing him after that. So I'm feeling like there was another scene that wasn't filmed, or maybe I just missed something. Because, like I said, I did watch in a different setting, so I could be missing a scene or two here or there. But overall, not too bad. On the other hand, I watched Renfield.
Yes.
And holy fuck, that movie does not have any right being as fun as it is.
It's a party, isn't it? Yeah.
I was not expecting it. They sell it saying, oh, Nick Cage is Dracula. That's great. That'll get people's attention. I didn't know, what's her name? Aquafina was the one police officer. And I can't remember the guy who plays Renfield. I can't remember his name off the top of my head.
Nicholas Holtz.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Him and the two of them together, like their chemistry and their silliness, and then the gangster for the Lobo family, like all those characters, it was a fun movie from start to finish. I was like, holy shit.
It is. Everybody, I know it got trashed in cinema, but I was like, damn, this movie is just fun. Yeah.
And I saw what you meant as far as them reshooting some scenes, or at least doing some creative editing scenes with the old Bela Lugosi movies, and putting Nick Cage and Nicholas Hoult both in like the Renfield and Dracula spots. That just felt natural when they did it on screen. I was like, oh, this is playing out. This is kind of nice. To the point where they were saying, I was reading up after it, they were saying that it's actually, in a sense, a sequel to the 1930s Dracula film. That's what they were going for. So
okay,
that's a far pull. Like you're talking about, oh, we wait 10 years for a sequel to this movie. You're waiting some odds like 70, 80 years.
1932 is when I think the Bela Lugosi Dracula came out. So
yes.
That's
almost 90.
Yeah, about 91 years.
That's insane. And then I was pleasantly surprised as I was going through the credits, and I saw, Robert Kirkman's name attached to it, famously attached to The Walking Dead and Invincible, which is really big right now on Amazon Prime. Walking Dead on AMC and all the other spin-offs it's got going on right now. And Skybound Entertainment, which is his entertainment company. So I was like, oh, okay, that explains the goriness, the silliness, then all the action all tied in together. This works. So for anybody who has not seen it, and we're still in the month of October as we're recording this, today is what, the 26th? 6th.
Yes.
Yeah, if you're watching Halloween movies this coming weekend, or by the time this comes out, probably, Halloween night, very much recommend Renfield. I saw it on Amazon Prime. It was fantastic. I had to pause it a couple times here and there because it was late night and take care of a few things, but I was like excited to watch it, excited to go through the whole thing. And I love, you mentioned how they tackle the idea of the power that Renfield has. He has a fraction of Dracula's power, but by consuming bugs and insects and everything, that's how he's able to, quote unquote, take life and then give himself the power boost, essentially. So
I love that touch as to why he eats bugs.
That
was such a, I thought it was like, oh, that is brilliant. I love that.
It made sense. I was like, holy crap, this this really works.
Mm-hmm.
And the one scene where he's in the bar and he starts beating the crap out of the Lobos, and he's like throwing serving trays and throwing people around and pulling people's arms off. It was just like, wow, okay. They just went with it and said, fuck it, we know what we're doing. This is just a silly Dracula movie. I mean, Nick Cage is our Dracula. Fuck, let's have fun with this. And Nick Cage, again, the fact that he was able to live in that character, and apparently he took a lot of his inspiration from Christopher Lee in the Hammer films. I was like, "Ooh, this is nice."
Mm-hmm. Yes.
I was like, all right. So, thank you for the recommendation for Renfield, because I was meaning to watch it. I'm happy I did now after you described it on your list, and just being able to try to catch up with a few other movies here and there. So, good stuff. Like I said, I'm not reaching 31. You're still on track. I hope.
You could say that. Yeah.
Oh no. Would you mind regaling us with the latest additions to your list? What you've watched recently?
Sure, I will update us and I will run through everything, and yeah, and I'll add commentary to the new stuff and see where we are with all that. All right, you ready?
Yes, let's do it.
Okay. Okay, recapping. Number one was Night of the Demons, the 1987 original. Then I did Messiah of Evil. Number three was Hell House LLC Part 3. Four was Hell House LLC Part 2. I'm watching them in reverse order because the prequel is going to be released on Monday, October 30th, exclusively on Shudder.
No.
Yes. Number five was Psycho Gorman. Number six was Crimson Peak. Number seven was Hell House LLC 1. Number 8 was Dead Don't Die. Number 9 was Renfield. 10, Lords of Salem. 11, Terrifier. 12, Brotherhood of the Wolf. 13, Funhouse Massacre. Do not watch that under any circumstances. 14, All Hallows Eve. 15, Dead and Buried. 16, Friday the 13th, the original from 1980. 17, The Wicker Man. 18, The Conjuring. 19, the original Halloween from 1978. Number 20 was Holidays. Number 21, Raven's Hollow. Number 22, Popcorn. Number 23, Halloween 2, the sequel from 1981. And that brings us up to where we are now. So we've got, holy shit, I've watched a lot of stuff in the last couple days. So at number 24, I've got I Drink Your Blood, which that is a old trashy horror exploitation movie from the 70s about a satanic hippie cult that wanders into a small town, starts fucking with the locals, including this older gentleman. So as revenge, the grandson of the older gentleman, he goes out, he finds a dead dog that had rabies, takes the blood that's infected with the rabies, injects it into meat pies that are then given to the hippie cult. So they eat the meat pies and they all get rabies, and wackiness ensues from there.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a 70s exploitation film. It's pretty gnarly. It's just ridiculous. It's just exploitation trash. It's just a fun time. It's floating around on streaming. Everybody go watch it. All right, next, this is a two-shot I did. The other day, number 25 and 26, I watched X and Pearl. Do you remember these?
They ring a vague bell.
Okay. X came out in March of last year. It is a movie. It's directed by Ty West, who also gave us House of the Devil and a bunch of other stuff over the last 10, 15 years. So it's set in 1979 down in Texas. It's the story of this really sleazy dude who puts together a group of people, including his girlfriend, and they go out and they rent the guest house at an old dilapidated farm, and they're going to use that to film a porno.
Okay.
The problem is, things start going wrong real fucking quick, especially when they find out that the elderly couple who own the farm that they're renting it from, yeah, they're not exactly who they say they are.
Oh, no.
It's the entire movie, a lot of it feels an awful lot like an homage to the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, right down to some of the shots that came out of it, felt like stuff that came out of TCM. It's a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. Yeah, everybody should go check it out. Mia Goth plays not one but two different characters in it, which is pretty fucking cool. And yeah, I'm trying to remember some of the other odd and weird random factoids about the entire thing. One of the best ways I can describe the entire movie is just sleazy. The whole movie just feels sleazy.
Kind of like a product of its time, I'm assuming.
Yeah. Well, it kind of harkens back to, in the olden days, horror movies, especially stuff like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Hills Have Eyes and a lot of stuff like that. Those were movies that were just, so gritty looking and so, done by, underground casts and stuff like that, and, really secretive crews because they were, unknowns that you really don't know what the hell you were watching. So it's should I be watching this? Is this a movie about maniacs, but was it actually made by maniacs? It felt like the kind of stuff that you couldn't go to see it in your suburban multiplex. This is the kind of movies that you had to either if you were in a major city, you went to one of those scumbag grindhouse theaters, or if you were down south, you went to a drive-in. Because down south, back in the old days, drive-ins were like a real seedy place, and like good people weren't seen hanging around them. It was usually like some really like questionable, shady folks and stuff like that. So yeah, X was a good time. And then I liked that so much, I immediately watched Pearl, which is a prequel to X. It's uses the same character from Pearl is the name of one of the elderly couple in X who owns the farm that the group of kids go out and rent to film the porno at. And this is the prequel. This is the story of Pearl going back to 1919. And it's the story of her on her family's farm. Her basically all day just not wanting to deal with her overbearing mother, her father who was crippled because of Spanish flu, which if you remember in 1919, that was raging pretty badly. Her husband's away fighting in World War One, and she's got dreams of wanting to be a famous person. So the entire thing is actually, it's interesting because at the end of it, it's kind of a slasher film, but it's also shot to feel kind of like, how can I describe it? Like some of the old Hollywood epics, like Gone with the Wind or The Wizard of Oz, to the point where it's even like the oversaturated colors, so the blues look incredibly rich and the greens look very vibrant.
Hmm.
And yeah, the final scene in that is just ridiculously uncomfortable. And once again, Mia Goth plays like the main role again. So she played Pearl in X, and they basically put makeup on her to make her look like she's like an 80-year-old woman. And then she also plays Pearl in Pearl, set, 60 years in the past. Except, yeah, she's just not like wearing makeup. It's just her. So it's pretty cool. I have to take my hat off. Mia Goth is a fucking amazing actress. And they're supposed to be making the third one in the series called Maxine, which is supposed to be set in the 1980s. And yeah, I'm looking forward to whenever the hell they get around to making that. I'm looking forward to that one too.
Okay, yeah, I was just looking up Mia Goth, and I see Maxine, the movie poster for it and everything. Um, okay, so X was first, and then Pearl was the prequel, right?
Yes. X came out first in theaters, and then Pearl came out second, but Pearl is the prequel to X.
Okay, now that you've watched both films, would you recommend watching them in the release order or the chronological order?
That's a good question. I watched X first just because I was like, well, this one came out in theaters first. Um, Actually, yeah, out there, yeah, now that I'm trying to like resequence it in my mind, yeah, totally, I would recommend actually watch Pearl first and then watch X.
Okay.
Um, it will kind of fill in a couple of blanks in, it will fill in a couple of the blanks in X that doesn't really make sense at any point in time that they don't really explain. So, yeah, it's kind of like, Pearl, the subtitle of Pearl is, I think it's called An Extraordinary Origin Film. So,
It's kind of
yeah, and actually, I will tell you something else that helped me immensely on accident that actually I will recommend to you or anybody else who decides to watch them. So I found them on Amazon Prime and I rented them. And when I rented X, for some odd reason, instead of selecting high definition, I selected standard definition, just probably because I don't pay attention sometimes to what I'm doing.
okay.
And that actually helped it because the standard definition made X feel a little grittier and grimier in how it looked.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, so I was even watching and I was like, oh, I grabbed the wrong one, fuck it. But then as I'm watching, I was like, this kind of works for it because now it really does feel like I felt like I was watching like a second generation videotape from like, the 80s of, something that came out in the 70s.
Okay.
And then when I rented Pearl, I made it a point, I was like, oh, make sure to grab the HD definition. And it really helped because it was shot with, like I said, like it had like the oversaturation of color in it. So it really made it pop off the screen even more. It's also pretty cool because the two of the early shots in both films are the same one where you're emerging from the barn on the property going towards the main house. Except in one, you could see how dilapidated the house looks, and in X you see how dilapidated the house looks and how like overgrown the properties become, and how just you could tell like everything's kind of like fallen out of favor. And then in Pearl, since it's an active farm, everything is cleaner, more organized, everything is active. And of course, since they're using like, the oversaturation of color is supposed to be kind of like a play on the Technicolor of the time, yeah, it looked, it really, really popped off the screen. So I think that actually helped with everything on Accident as well.
Okay. That reminds me of I don't know if you ever watched the Leonardo DiCaprio movie, The Aviator.
I've never seen that. I was meant to, but I mean, I never got around to it.
It's a fun movie just to get like the brief life of Howard Hughes and how it's told in what, like 2.5 hours. I don't remember how long the film is. But the cool thing that they did when they did filming was in the different eras where they're doing the film, they actually chose different film stock to represent that era. So the early scenes of the film look very like you're saying, that it has that like gritty, that almost like blurry feeling to it.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say it starts off in like black and white, and then gradually it switches over with color and the different film stocks, so things look a little bit more clearer, more vibrant. But it was a deliberate choice on the director's part. I believe it was Scorsese, who they just wanted to have the different film eras depicted just by using the different film stock, just to give that feel of what it was if you were watching a film in that era. So it's a very subtle trick, and you might not catch it the first time that you watch it, but I watched that movie a few times. It's actually one of my favorite films, and just to see the progression of the visuals itself and how that goes through, I'm like, wow, that's some camera trickery right there. There's a reason why Scorsese is one of the all-time greats. That was just a weird like choice, but it really, really works. And if you're looking for it, you're like, oh, I can respect that decision. That's an awesome choice, the way that you pull that off. So that's cool. It's cool that it worked out for you that way as far as the two movies, between the sequel and the original. So
no, it was. I totally chalk it up to a wonderful, happy accident that actually kind of enriched the viewing experience on Accident. So let's see. Moving on from there, number 27, Near Dark, our classic cowboy vampire film with Lance Henriksen, Bill Paxton, and Adrian Pasdar.
It's so much fun.
Yeah. Great movie. I love that one. It's such like a lost classic, since it's tough to find anywhere. In fact, you can't get that currently. Last time I checked.
Really, that's a freaking shame, because that movie, thanks to you let me borrow your copy of it, and I was able to return this one. That movie was, again, it's just a fun film. I mean, it feels like it goes by pretty quickly, but it's so great in the self-contained story that, I mean, you really don't need much else. And to see Bill Paxton just being Bill Paxton, especially way back then with the group of vampires, it's just awesome. That's definitely
Absolutely.
what I recommend to for anybody to watch as well, if they can get their hands on it.
If it's every now and again it shows up on random streaming services, but the DVD's long out of print. So yeah, that's a tough one, unfortunately. I know on occasion it does pop up on YouTube in its entirety, and then it disappears pretty quickly. But yeah, keep an eye out there. See what you can come up with it. Anyway, after that, I watched Halloween, the Rob Zombie one from 2007, because I haven't seen that in about 15 years. And I wanted to see if it was any good, if I still had a positive opinion of it.
And?
Not bad.
Oh, okay.
I remember liking it when I watched it, and I was like, you know what, this isn't bad. First off, I love the fact that it had like basically an ensemble cast of who's who in horror films. Like Ken Foray's in it, and Adrienne Barbeau's in it, and Danny Trejo's in it, and Richard Brake's in it, and Danielle Harris is in it, and yeah, there's just this great cast for the entire thing, and I kind of like the idea of making. I wasn't too fond of, well, here's why Michael Myers is fucked up, but I appreciate the fact that they made him just this hulking monster, which was kind of like an interesting take on the whole thing.
Okay.
And then after that, I watched the sequel to Halloween, Halloween 2 from 2009, the Rob Zombie Halloween 2. That sucked. I don't know what he was going for. He had a lot of lofty ideas, and they were talking to ghosts, and there was all kinds of weird psychic connections. I was just like, what the fuck is going on here? This is fucking stupid.
So I remember hearing stories about this one, and from what I can recall was Rob Zombie just wanted to do the one and done for Halloween. That was it. He wasn't expecting to go any further. Didn't want to make a sequel. Didn't want to, play out the story any further than what he had in the original film. But the studio essentially said, "Hey, we want you to make a sequel." He goes, I'm not up for it. I want to do other things." He goes, "Okay, we can either pay you more to do the sequel, or we'll just give it to somebody else." And then they started outlining ideas as far as where they were going to take it. He goes, all right, never mind. I'll do it. Fuck. All right, I'll do it. Essentially worried that whoever followed up after him was going to butcher whatever story he created in the first one and just drive it into the ground. So I'm of the opinion that he did it under protest and said, "Screw it. If anybody's going to burn this, this house down, it's going to be me," and just went for it.
You know what? That actually kind of makes sense. And it's also hilarious because initially, John Carpenter needed a little bit of coaxing into doing Halloween 2 in 1981.
Really? I don't remember that. Well, Halloween 2 that's the one with the Halloween masks, right?
No, Halloween 3 is the one with the masks.
Season of the Witch, right?
So, yeah, that was Season of the Witch. So here was the weird thing. So, John Carpenter, if I remember the story correctly, around that time he was finishing up at I think it was UCLA Film School, and that was going to UCLA Film School and graduating from there. That's a good way to springboard off into Hollywood. John Carpenter ended up getting recruited to go make this wacky horror movie that, after tweaking it and figuring it out, it became like this massively successful independent film. I think they had it was a ridiculously small budget they worked off of, I think $40,000 or $50,000, and it made just stupid amounts of money. So he did that, and then that kind of was like, oh man, my ticket's punched now. Now I'll be able to go do all the stuff I want to do, because he wanted to do, he wanted to do action, and he wanted to do horror, and he wanted to do sci-fi, and he wanted to do weird hybrid films and all kinds of stuff like that. So, he didn't even do Halloween 2 directly. He went out and he worked on The Fog, and I think there was another project in there before finally the studio came back and said, "Why don't you do Halloween 2?" And he was like, "Nah, I don't know about that one." They're like, "Here's a pile of money." He was like, "Okay, fine, I'll do the fucking movie." And his idea after that was, okay, so this is it. Michael Myers is done. We're going to wrap this one up, and then the original plan was Halloween was going to become a anthology series where they do one or two movies for a storyline, and then after that they basically take it and then they just do something else that was something else related to the concept of Halloween, the holiday. So then after that, Halloween 2 was successful, not as successful, but still made money for them. So then they're like, okay, what do you want to do next? And he was like, Halloween 3, and it'll be Season of the Witch, and it'll be completely different, and we're going to have the story with the masks, and Tom Atkins is going to be running around doing all kinds of cool shit, and it's going to be a blast. And that one fucking tanked hard.
Yeah.
I've come to appreciate it. It actually is a pretty good film, but yeah, it did not land at all. And I mean, basically then it just kind of, everything lay dormant for another 3 years, I think it was 4 years or so. And then in 1988 they came and they said, okay, let's go do another Halloween, but let's bring back Michael Myers, and we'll roll from there. Plus, also by that point, I don't remember exactly when this happens. Around that point in time, the Halloween franchise, the rights to it, was purchased by a guy named Mustafa Akkad. I believe he was an Egyptian. He was big in finance, but he also loved cinema, and he just basically bought his way into Hollywood, if I remember correctly. So he basically bought the property, got his hands on it, and then went to John Carpenter and said, let's work together and just go make fucking movies. And what do you want to do? This is what I want to do. Oh, John, you don't want to direct? Fine. How about you just do the music and maybe and I'll give you an executive producer credit, whatever you want to do. I just want you to help out with me. But Yeah, they ended up just doing some nonsense like that, and that's basically how we got Halloween 4 and Halloween 5 and Halloween 6 and H2O and Halloween Resurrection and the Rob Zombie reboots and then Halloween 2018 and then Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, and that's where we are now. It's actually weird, like you actually have Halloween has its own fucking multiverse because there's currently, I think, four different storylines all in the movie, depending on which movie you're watching at any point in time. So,
Yeah, because the Mike Myers storylines are like three different iterations, and then you've got the Season of the Witch by itself. Which,
well, yeah, basically there's so if you use your nexus point is Halloween from 1970, that's your starting point.
yep,
Then Halloween 2 branches off, and from Halloween 2 in 1981, the direct sequel to Halloween 2 is Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, then Halloween 5 and Halloween 6. But then they do Halloween H2O in 1998, and that's a direct sequel to Halloween 2, and then Halloween Resurrection spurs off of that. And then then you have the Rob Zombie remakes. They're their own thing. And then the Halloween 2018 is a direct sequel to Halloween 1978, and then you get Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends. Yeah, this is like people have to diagram this shit out because things have gotten so fucking weird.
yeah, but I can appreciate that though. See, it's fun to see where it went, and it's not because the director wanted it to go there, but because the studios are like, oh, we need you to make this. We need you to work on that. And the fact that the other gentleman who brought the rights out still wanted to include John Carpenter, it wasn't like, I want you to do this. No, the fact, like you were saying, all right, if you don't want to direct, do the music or help out in this way or just consult or whatever the case is, just be attached to it because your name lends credibility to the project just by doing that alone. You didn't have to be behind the camera. And the fact that, I mean, imagine creating an icon, a horror icon in this case, but just a typical, movie icon that's going to have different variations, different tellings over the years. It's smart for the one guy to buy the rights because he can secure them. Now, whenever they do subsequent movies, he gets a cut of it. But like, I still have to watch 2018 Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends. I just want that sounds like a fun trilogy right there of itself. Having the Laurie Strode character live through what she did, having to cope with it and process it, and then it can pretty much be like a doomsday prepper, but for Michael Myers.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole storyline like intrigues me right there, and that to have Jamie Lee Curtis come back and reprise the role and everything else, that sounds like an awesome story. But I'm sure, like just like with any franchise, just because it's called Halloween Ends doesn't mean that it's going to be the end of the story. I'm sure somebody else is going to come along and reimagine it, do another take on it, and we'll have, for lack of a better term, further adventures of Michael Myers. So,
I mean, well, as long as as a final like addendum to the entire thing, Mustafa Akkad sadly was killed at a hotel in Cairo in 2005 in a terrorist bombing.
oh shit.
Yeah, so the rights went to, he's got a son named Malik Akkad, or Malik Akkad, I'm not 100% sure how to pronounce it. But yeah, he is now the executive producer. So anytime, if you go watch the 2018 triple shot of Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends, yeah, it'll say like, instead of saying Mustafa Akkad presents, it'll say Malik Akkad presents.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm sure given another couple of years, and I'm sure they'll be like, all right, how do we make some more money on this one? Well, we got to go figure something the fuck out. So,
Yeah, I mean, just dream up or, write up a different kind of story for it. It doesn't necessarily have to be the same Michael Myers over and over again. We can do different things. Hence, Rob Zombie's big hulking Michael Myers. Yeah, I mean, all these horror icons can definitely be pushed further and further. I mean, how many Chucky films have we had? How many Nightmare on Elm Streets are we going to have at this point? I know we had a different Freddy Krueger. They might do another one down the line. So long as there is another one for another generation, they'll keep pushing them out so long as they make money. Because like we've said before, most horror movies done right, you can do them on a shoestring budget and get big returns.
yep.
You don't have to put in a lot of CGI. You don't have to put on a lot of effects. Practical effects work if they're done correctly, and they can get the right effect, the right feeling, the right reaction, and then from there you're just printing money and just having fun.
Yeah, and I mean, and that's the thing. Like, all you have to do is basically just, as long as you're trying to like come up with like a fresh idea for the property. I mean, as long as you're putting some type of effort forth. I mean, that's the entire kick of the thing. I mean, I'm trying to think of a good example for the entire thing right now. Like last I heard, since they got the lawsuit for Friday the 13th settled between Victor Miller and Sean Cunningham, word is they're trying to workshop a TV series out of it right now. So how that plays out, I have no idea what's going to happen. I haven't heard anything about that since before the writer's strike, but last I heard they were trying to figure out like what to do with it. I heard rumors that it was supposed to be about the earlier times at Crystal Lake, after the drowning of child Jason. So it was kind of dealing with Mrs. Voorhees running around like fucking not letting people reopen the camp by like fucking up the water or setting cabins on fire or fucking stabbing people or whatever the fuck. So how that one plays out, I have no idea how it's going to be. I mean, good Lord, they're doing a Chucky TV series, and I think they're on like the 3rd season right now. So yeah, there's all kinds of shit you can do with this stuff. Oddly enough, I'm not sure what's going on with the rights of it because I'm not the biggest Nightmare on Elm Street fan, but yeah, we haven't heard hide nor hair out of that one since we got the 2010 remake with Jackie Earle Haley. So
long as we don't do another anthology series, like they were trying to do, I think Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street both had on anthology series at one point. And you're like, okay.
Well, those were just the TV shows I think they were doing just to. Well, Friday the 13th, it was funny because yeah, it was weird because they even used the logo, and they used some of the same music, but other than that, it had absolutely nothing to do with Jason and/or Crystal Lake whatsoever.
Yeah. Whereas,
and, Freddy's Nightmares was basically just like, Freddy's hot right now, throw him on TV, and yeah, he can just kind of like, he was basically the Crypt Keeper.
Exactly.
Because yeah, he was just like goofing off and doing bad horror shtick and introducing like, here's our next spooky story. So,
see, and I remember watching parts of those growing up as well, because having Freddy like just crack jokes in between, one story to the next. I'm like, what the hell's going on here?
That's what I said. I was like, where's my razor glove slash people up? Why is he just kind of like fucking around being a goofball? Like, what the hell's going on here?
It makes me wonder if they'll ever merge the properties again, like they did Freddy versus Jason. They had the other spin-offs, so Freddy versus Jason versus Michael Myers, or Freddy versus Jason versus Ash from the Evil Dead, that kind of stuff. It would be fun to see those in live action. I know they exist in comic book form, but it's like, how do you wrangle that beast? Because intellectually, for all the different IPs, how to get those on the table and everybody to agree and everybody to sign off and it be what it is. I would love to see Ash take on those characters, but I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. At the very least, I don't think it's going to be Bruce Campbell anymore because he's up there in age at this point.
Yeah, he's I think he's pushing like 65 or so I have no idea what the hell's going to happen with that one. But yeah, I mean, like, and it's kind of been talked about for years. Like, there was, I'm trying to remember, like, I know there was like a lot of workshopping done in the 90s and 2000s. I want to say that there's multiple treatments floating around out there for, I think it's Michael Myers versus Pinhead and the Cenobites. I've definitely heard about stuff like related to that. In fact, I think that was one of the original ideas for when Rob Zombie was working on the sequel. I think that was one of the ideas that he actually pitched, and he was like, how about we do something where like these characters are like interrelated in one way or another? And I think like got like vetoed by the studio because they're like, no, we're not doing that. But it's like, yeah. But as Freddy versus Jason, as good as it was, it still underperformed at the box office, number one. And number two, that movie by all regards was a fucking nightmare to make because it took 10 years for them to finally get that fucking thing together. So,
oh yeah, what was it? The Jason Goes to Hell. The speculation was there after the final scene where you see the razor glove comes up and grabs the mask and pulls it down into the ground.
Well, that was the weirdness of that time period, and this is where you get into some like the really odd legal shit with Hollywood. So Paramount went under, and the properties got bought by New Line Cinema, who owned Nightmare on Elm Street, but they didn't own the Friday the 13th name. Hence why when they put out Jason Goes to Hell, the final Friday, it wasn't called Friday the 13th.
Really?
Yeah, which is such a weird thing because there's like a lot of like weird like ownership deals worked out with these things, because I think the actual Friday the 13th property was owned by, I want to say, Sean Cunningham. So, which also begs the question: it's like, well, why the hell didn't they just go to him and be like, we just call it Friday the 13th? But why anything happens in Hollywood is we all know it's full of it's run by crazy people, which really get down to it. But yeah, then they did the entire closing thing with the Razor Glove coming up, and holy shit, we're going to get Freddy versus Jason. People forget, yeah, that was in development hell for 9 years. I mean, it was 2002 before they started filming the damn thing. And there's at least, I've come across at least, I want to say 3 different scripts that are floating around on the internet that purport to be different treatments or spec scripts that were written up for it. That according to legend, Rob Zombie wrote one. I don't know where that one is. I can't definitely remember reading one that had something to do with Leonardo da Vinci, which sounds completely bonkers to me if I've ever heard anything like that.
Okay.
And there's a couple of other ones where it even like has to do with like, where there's one where basically the devil pits the two of them against each other to see who will be his chief assassin by proving which one is more powerful than the other. Yeah, Jesus Christ. It was insane, like the amount of shit that was going on with that, because it was just nobody could agree on what they wanted. So
yeah, that one sounds kind of grandiose when you involve the devil.
Yeah, that one's a little much up there.
Yeah, there's one thing that I've learned recently, and especially, everything that was going on with the writer's strike recently, that when somebody writes a script for a new idea, so let's say if you, Doug, write a Hollywood script or screenplay, you take it to whatever studio, and if they accept it, they're not necessarily going to hold on to that script, or at least that version of it. They'll buy it from you, at which point, yeah, you get some money for it. Depending on your deal, you might get some points on the back end, depending on when it's released. But from there, then they'll take it, have a bunch of people read it, and they say, okay, well, let's find somebody to do another draft. And there, the script can go to 1, 2, 3, maybe 4, and beyond, different drafts by different writers. And at that point, the story will begin to change over time. Certain elements will be redone or overhauled. Other elements will be dropped altogether. Sometimes if you get further down the line, somebody will say, oh, I like that original premise from the first draft. Let's pull that first draft part out, and then we'll put it into the 5th or 6th draft, whatever the case is. At that point, you kind of have a mishmash of what the original idea was. Mm-hmm. And it's the story of, if you ever ask the original writer, like, oh, what do you think of the story that you wrote? Because you did the initial concept. And they're like, you know what, honestly, I watched it on screen and I don't recognize anything other than the name of the character and the premise overall. Otherwise, everything else was made up by the studio or whatever other writer took over. I'm a huge fan of Transformers, and recently they found up to 4 different drafts of the movie for Transformers 1986. And it's weird because this is one guy online, Feely, I want to say, he does what's called the basics on Transformers. He did a breakdown of all the different drafts and what the different iterations of the movie would have been, and you see where certain scenes were thought up and different concepts were brought to the big screen for the first time, and then by the time you get to the final version of script or the final draft, certain things were cut out that were in the first draft, certain things were renamed, or certain new creations were given new life in a sense. And from there, it became the movie that we knew as Transformer fans. But if you just see the progression of the story and the characters and everything else, it's like, wow, what could have been had they done this instead of what was released? Whether it was good or bad remains to be seen, but it's the same thing with anything in Hollywood. The different versions of it, like you said, hearing that Rob Zombie had done a draft of Freddy versus Jason, that sounds cool in concept alone, but as we've seen, Rob Zombie can be hit or miss if it's not his property. So
yep,
he's essentially a fanboy. uber fanboy in a certain sense because he had a chance to play with these icons. But it doesn't mean just because Rob Zombie did it with it, that's going to be, oh, that's the script we have to use. No, they'll go to somebody else who has done a few other horror scripts, or maybe they'll find somebody with no horror experience to say, give me your take on this. And then from there, you'll go. Like the one gentleman you mentioned who did Jason X apparently had no concept of the previous Jason movies, just wrote it on the idea alone. And you got.
Oh, Todd Farmer.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then you got Uber Jason. So. Yeah, I mean that stuff gets really, really weird sometimes when you go down that route because the studio doesn't care. So long as they want X amount of beats per page, they want action, they want gore in the case of horror, the occasional nudity as well. They're just looking for a formula, and once they have a formula that they believe can win over and over again, they'll try to adhere to that formula as best they can. I was just watching a breakdown of the movie Scream. And come to find out, Henry Winkler's character of the principal, his death only served in the movie because the studio is like, there's too many beats between this kill and the last kill. We need another kill in between. Oh, let's kill Henry Winkler's character.
Oh, okay.
And they're like, I mean, okay. I mean, we don't have to. I mean, what do the kids have against the principal? Oh, he's a principal in high school. All kids hate the principal. Okay, fine, whatever. And they did that. I mean, you got the one scene where the principal hears a sound, looks outside, and you see Wes Craven in the Freddy sweater, like mopping the floor.
Yeah.
And then you see Ghostface in the office and takes him out. Spoilers for anybody who hasn't seen Scream. But
also, why are we giving spoilers on a 28-year-old movie?
Exactly. Well, it just happens. You're going to come across somebody who's like, I always meant to watch it. Now I can't because you ruined it for me. Screw you. If you haven't seen it at this point, like you said, 28, god damn, I feel that wouldn't hurt. Stop it.
Pardon me, 27 years.
Okay, yeah. Still, it doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, it's a moment like that where the studio intervenes and says, we want another kill in between because the action slows down a little bit. Let's keep the action rolling. And again, the studio has a certain amount of say. Once everybody has their hand in the pot and they're trying to add their own little seasoning to it, like, all right, guys, let it be what it's going to be. It's Wes Craven doing a satire on horror and whatever the case is. But yeah, that just gives you an indication that sometimes they're like, oh, we need to tweak this, we need to tweak that, bigger explosion here, more sex there, whatever the case is. They'll try to get involved. And I guess in that respect, I can see why indie films are much more of a safe haven for artists, because you don't have the studio necessarily breathing down your neck saying you have to make these changes. Mm-hmm. One of the big things that kills a lot of relationships in Hollywood, especially in productions, is the notes. When the studio starts to give you notes, and it's just like, why? What are we doing this for? Like, you hired the person for a reason, let them do their thing. But people want to put their own ideas in and change things just to their liking so they can say to their friend while they're watching the movie, like, hey, you see that scene? Yeah, that was my idea. Okay. Mm-hmm. So just stuff like that. And it's interesting just to see how it progresses sometimes. Netflix has been counterintuitive to that. Well, they'll actually for the most part, let a lot of different things go. The notes are minimal. They might be more, minimal things here and there as far as like little details, but otherwise they'll let a lot of the creators who make movies for Netflix just have at it. And at that point they can say, oh, great, another Netflix original. If it's great, it's great. If not, it gets thrown on the back end streaming and everybody has fun.
Well, I believe the one statistic I heard is from Tom Lennon, who's, written scripts and also done a lot of punch up for other scripts, is he says, I think it was, if you sell 10 scripts, maybe one of them will actually get made into a movie.
Exactly.
So,
yep.
Yeah, I mean, how crazy is that? But let's see, getting back to the list. So that was Halloween 2 was the last one. So number 30 was Death Spa, a classic.
Oh, I remember this one. I haven't seen it. I heard of it. I think, How Did This Get Made cover this one?
Yes, they did. They did that one some years ago because it is... So the rough premise is this guy opens a state-of-the-art gym where everything is controlled by a computer. But yeah, there's some type of evil spirit possessing the computer and killing people in the gym. And it is as ridiculous as it sounds. It is a blast to watch, but holy fuck balls, it is ridiculous. And then after that, I went and dipped in for a real classic and went and watched Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman from 1943.
How was that one?
It's interesting because it's an hour and 15 minutes long. Um, I liked it. It was very good because, interestingly enough, you had oh bloody hell, I'm blanking on the fellow's name, but the same guy who always played the Wolfman in all the Universal films. But in that one, Frankenstein's monster was played by Bela Lugosi.
Really?
Yes, I was thinking, I was like, oh, it must have been Boris Karloff, but he didn't play it in that one. It was so yeah, the guy who played Dracula played Frankenstein's monster as well. It's an interesting premise. Larry Talbot, the guy who is the Wolfman, two grave robbers accidentally disturb the wolf's bane in his coffin, so he comes back from the dead and he's all despondent because he can't die because of the curse. So he seeks out an old Romany woman and says, well, I don't know what to do with you, but there's one guy we might be able to search out. We need to find a Dr. Frankenstein, so we need to go to his area and see what we can come up with. So they go out there, and they end up, he's long dead, but they manage to come across his daughter, Baroness Frankenstein, and they're trying to figure out how to find his notes, because if he knew about how to create life, maybe he knew how to create death as well. And then you also find out that Frankenstein's monster is actually not dead. He's just kind of like tucked away and in a dormant state. And it's actually a lot of fun. It was really good. Like some of the models they used for the castle and other stuff, like it's clearly a model, but it looked fun. And I was being like, oh, this is probably going to drag really bad. And I was like, nah, it wasn't terrible. It kind of moved at its own pace, but it was not bad. I've seen movies made in the 70s that are way slower than that. So it was good stuff.
Okay.
And rounding out the list, the last thing I watched was Exorcist 3.
Remind me the premise of that one.
That is the one that you're back in DC. I think it's 15 years after the events of The Exorcist, and all of a sudden, a bunch of people are being murdered, and a DC detective named Kinderman is trying to put all the clues together. And yeah, he believes it might just happen to be a killer from years past. And yeah, you find out there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on, and everything's kind of tied into the killer is actually like somebody they thought was long dead, and there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on, and everybody's being controlled by Pazuzu on the evil side.
Huh, I don't think I've ever watched that one.
I've never watched Exorcist 2 because by all accounts everyone said it's absolute poop. So I just never bothered watching it. But Exorcist 3 actually has an incredibly there's this one scene in it that's absolutely fucking terrifying the way they put it together. So it's actually got some legit scares in it. And yeah, George C. Scott plays the crusty old police officer Kinderman, so it's actually pretty fucking cool.
Okay.
Yep.
And that one.
So far I am at 32 films for the month.
Damn, that's a lot of films, dude.
Yeah, it's wild. A buddy of mine, he's like, I think he's up around 45 or so for the year, for the month so far.
Does he work from home? What the fuck?
Actually, yeah, he does work from home.
Oh, there you go. All right.
So yeah, I was like, he's like doing like, there's been like online, like there's a dude on Twitch. He did like a 24-hour horror marathon last weekend. He watched all of that. I was like, I'm cool. I don't need to watch that much stuff. But yeah, there's some people who like, you realize that there's a lot of people out there like really that's like their whole thing is they're just going to watch a shit ton of movies. So, and that's just like that's how they relax. That's how they catch their breath. That's how they do their thing. So, yep. But that is as far as I've gotten now. There's a couple more I want to get in the can before we wrap up the month of October in the next couple days. So, yeah, we'll see what happens.
That's really cool, dude. Wow, that's a lot of films to watch in 1 month, man. I try to catch a few in here, like here and there, like I said, but even I think chapter 2 took me at least 3 or 4 different sittings, just because my schedule's so hectic. Chapter 1, I was lucky because I think I watched it on a weekend, so I watched the majority of it on one night and just finished up the whatever was left over the following. Renfield, I was able to watch. I think I watched it actually last week after we finished recording.
Okay,
I think I just
that
threw
sounds
it
about
on.
right.
I just threw it on and like fuck, I'm just gonna watch this all the way through. I'm trying to remember what else. No, I don't think I ever really watched much else as far as never got a chance to get back to Sinister. Want to try to finish that one up. And Insidious has been sitting in my queue on HBO. So I have to try to get back to some of those and just try to, again, just appreciate them for what they are at this point and what they bring. So, last time you and I spoke, we were talking about trick-or-treating stories and even talking about some of the Mischief Nights that have come and gone in my youth when I was running around with my brothers, which made me then get curious. Do you know where Mischief Night originated?
Actually, no, I do not. Where did it originate?
Well, I came across it, funny enough, off of a podcast. For anybody who out there who listens to Stuff You Should Know, had a recent episode on the origin of trick-or-treating, and they even talk about Mischief Night, which brought this up to me as well. Because I'm like, oh, okay, I was just thinking about this. So I decided to look it up, and a lot of this recall from what they were talking about, but also I looked it up on Wikipedia, because it's not the end-all be-all of research, but it's what I had time for, and it had a lot of different similar points. Mischief Night is an informal holiday on which children, teenagers, and adults engage in jokes, pranks, vandalism, or parties. It is known by a variety of names, including, tell me if you don't recognize any of these names, Devil's Night, Gate Night, Goosey Night, Moving Night, Cabbage Night, Mystery Night, and Mat Night.
I've heard Devil's Night. The rest of those sound bizarre.
Okay. Let's see. Again, I'm just going to read a little bit here. Earliest reference to Mischief Night is from 1790, when a headmaster encouraged a school play which ended in an ode to fun, which praises children's tricks on Mischief Night in the most approving terms. In some regions in England, these pranks were originally carried out as part of the May Day celebrations, but shifted to later year dates varying in different areas, some marking it traditionally on November 4th, the night before Bonfire Night, or October 30th, the night before Halloween, through the latter is marked traditionally nowadays. According to one historian, May Day and the Green Man had little resonance for children in grimy cities. They looked at the opposite end of the year and found the ideal time the night before the gunpowder plot. However, the shift only happened in the late 19th century and is described by the Oppies, I believe I'm saying that correctly, as one of the mysteries of folklore calendar. So let's see here. In most of New Jersey and other regions of the United States, including New Orleans, Philadelphia, Lehigh Valley region of eastern Pennsylvania, Delaware, parts of New York State, and Connecticut, it is referred to as Mischief Night, or particularly in the Green Lakes region, Devil's Night in some towns in North New Jersey and parts of New York State. It is also known as Goosey Night and Cabbage Night. In Baltimore, Maryland, it has traditionally been referred to as Moving Night due to the custom of exchanging or stealing porch furniture and other outside items. In Detroit, which was particularly affected by Devil's Night arson and vandalism throughout the 1980s, many citizens took it upon themselves to patrol the streets to deter arsonists who may break the law. This is known as Angel's Night. Some 40,000 volunteer citizens patrol the city on Angel's Night, which usually runs October 29th through October 31st, around the time most Halloween festivities take place. In rural Niagara Falls, Ontario, during the 1950s and 60s, Cabbage Night referred to the custom of raiding local gardens for leftover rotting cabbages and hurling them about to cause mischief in the neighborhood. Today, the night is celebrated in Ontario and is also commonly known as Cabbage Night in parts of the United States, areas of Vermont, Connecticut, Bergen County, New Jersey, upstate New York, northern Kentucky, Newport, Rhode Island, and western Massachusetts. It is known as Gate Night in New Hampshire, West Kootenay and British Columbia, Vancouver Island, Winnipeg, Thunder Bay, Ontario, Bay City, Michigan, Rockland County, New York, North Dakota, and South Dakota as Mat Night in English-speaking Quebec, where a tradition of stealing front door mats developed. and as Devil's Night in many places throughout Canada, Michigan, and Western New York and Western Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
Almost
That's
done.
wild.
There's a little bit more. In some parts of the country, Mischief Night is held on October 30th, the night before Halloween. The separation of Halloween tricks from treats seem to have only developed in certain areas, often appearing in one region, but not in all nearby regions. Mischief Night is known in Yorkshire as Mischievous Night, or the shortened Chivas Night, Miggy Night, Tic Tac Night, Corn Night, Trick Night, or Mickey Night, and is celebrated across northern England on November 4th, the night before Bonfire Night, which I mentioned earlier. In some of the areas of Yorkshire, it is extremely popular among 13-year-olds, as they believe it is a sort of coming-of-age ceremony. In and around the city of Liverpool, Mischief Night is known locally as Mizzy Night. Trouble areas were being patrolled by the Merseyside Police in 2015. It is known in Welsh as Noson Regioni. It's a weird spelling here. Noson space DDRYGIONI. In Scotland, Scottish Gaelic as Odishi nan Clis. And I know I'm butchering that pronunciation. So the simple question of, hey, where does Mischief Night come from? Apparently it just got a whole bunch of different variations and offshoots. I think Mat Night might be my favorite one. We're just stealing people's doormats. It sounds so silly and innocent.
That is so ridiculous. The only thing that would be better than that is if on Mat Night, instead of stealing the mats, you just mix them up. So like all of a sudden you randomly had like your neighbor from like four doors down, you have their mat that says like, cats are always welcome, and somebody else has a mat all of a sudden that says, hey, welcome to the Jefferson's house, and it's definitely not the Jefferson's house, or whatever the fuck, just kind of like, I think that would be the kind of thing I did, where it's like, I'm just going to take your mat and I'm going to switch it with somebody else's mat just to fuck with you.
But that also lends itself to the other story that I heard on that episode of Stuff You Should Know, where Halloween and Mischief Night are in certain areas, in certain regions, seen as a coming of age ceremony for the kids, because as we were talking about last time, once you get to a certain age, you're too old for that Halloween shit. You shouldn't be going out there trick-or-treating. Way back when, kids used to go out together in groups, with their friends and trick-or-treat, and for the most part were unsupervised. You're just going out there getting candy from, strangers. One of the things they tell you not to do. But the idea that you're out there unsupervised, the idea that you're on your own, having fun, it's learning that responsibility in a sense, and being able to go out, have fun, and come home safely. So for kids, yes, it's something for them. And then once they get to a certain age, then they stop, because I didn't know 13 was like the cutoff for a lot of kids. I mean, I remember we talked about before, having teenagers in their later years, especially, continue trick-or-treating. At the very least, they're staying out of trouble. So they're just going out and having good, clean fun at that point. And then you go into the variations of, trick or treat and pranks that were played, because either you give me a piece of candy or I'm going to play a nasty prank on you and stuff like that. So to see that Mischief Night had so many different names and so many different variations, like Cabbage Night was new to me. I was like, taking a piece of rotten cabbage and throw it in somebody's yard, that's just nasty. But you have like all these different things, like, oh, this has been not just here, in other areas as well. Trick-or-treating is an American invention. That in of itself was just the idea of kids going out and getting free candy. So, and let's face it, like all the candy manufacturers also jump in on that one, because they're like essentially saying, oh, we can just sell tons of candy in that season, so why not? They just crank them out like crazy. But I found it very interesting to see where Mischief Night came from. And again, they mentioned the arsons out in Detroit. You and I love The Crow. That's the backdrop of the story. On Devil's Night, all the craziness that happens. The characters of Eric and Shelley get taken down because of the local crime boss is trying to clear the area out, and they won't get out of the apartment. So they say, well, if you're not going to leave, then we're just going to beat, rape, and kill your fiance, and then do the same to you and throw you out of a window. sad story. Anybody who hasn't watched it, spoilers, go watch it. I should probably say spoilers ahead of time, just so I don't ruin certain parts of the story for people who haven't watched them yet. Either way, I do it playfully. But to hear the different offshoots, the different ideas, the different... it's all pranks. It's always been that. It's always been some kind of mischievous play in and around that time. And it's the tradition carries on. Like, especially nowadays. I haven't seen anybody lately in the past couple of years go out for Mischief Night around these areas. But then again, I don't run around with hooligans. So who knows? Who knows if my kids are going to grow up and say, oh, Dad, we're going to be right back. Where are you guys going? What are you doing with that toilet paper? Hey, are those my eggs? Stuff like that. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it just set me down a rabbit hole. And like all the different information I was finding out. I'm like, oh, wow, this is fucking pretty cool. I didn't realize Angels Night was a thing. That's pretty neat to get that many people together and say, hey, look, we're just going to keep our neighborhood safe. And prevent.
I've heard of that one before.
Have you?
Yeah, that one I've heard of before. Because
Okay.
I want to say Angels Night was a creation in Detroit where it was basically communities getting together to patrol locally to prevent the arson.
Okay.
That's the one thing. I could have sworn I've read that somewhere along the way over the years, but I couldn't be misremembering shit.
Let's see here. Modern practice for Mischief Night. Mischief Night is generally recognized as a New Jersey, Eastern Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Maryland, and Delaware phenomenon.
Mm-hmm.
Mischief Night tends to include popular tricks such as toilet papering yards and buildings, powder bombing and egging cars, people, and homes, using soap to write on windows, forking yards. Don't know what that means. Oh,
Yeah, I don't know that.
I do know what this
What?
means. You go out and you buy a pack of forks, like plastic utensils, and just put them in the yard.
Huh. Okay.
Sorry, that one literally just came to me as I was saying it. Setting off fireworks and smashing pumpkins and jack-o'-lanterns. Aren't they the same thing?
Well, you can put out a jack-o'-lantern is carved, a pumpkin. All jack-o'-lanterns are pumpkins, but not all pumpkins are jack-o'-lanterns.
Fair. Okay, I see what you're saying. All right. Gotcha. I just assumed. Local grocery stores often refuse to sell eggs to children and teenagers around the time of Halloween for this reason. Occasionally, the damage can escalate to include the spray painting of buildings and homes. Less destructive is the prank known as Ding Dong Ditch. In New Orleans, have you done Ding Dong Ditch?
No, I never have. I just know what it is.
Okay. My brothers have participated in Ding Dong Ditch. They had a different name for it in our area, but it was the same premise. Just go up, ring the doorbell, and run off.
What did they call it?
N-word knocking.
Oh, okay.
Not-
Moving right along.
Yeah. The 80s were a fun time. In New Orleans from 2014 to 2018, Mischief Night involved a series of unruly parade-like riots. According to participants, the Mischief Night crews follow in New Orleans Carnival's centuries-old tradition of walking parades, most of which take place in the lead-up to Mardi Gras. Mixing revelry with mindless violence, Mischief Night parades involve thematic floats and costumes as well as targeted vandalism and fires. Targets of vandalism, attacks, and arson have included the police, bystanders, and property. When asked in an interview from 2017 how Mischief Night in New Orleans fits into the context of Carnival, a parader replied, "Our carnival traditions are those that actually want to turn the world upside down." After a parade through the downtown in 2016 that saw bonfires in the street, police cars hit with paint, and now removed white supremacist monument shipped away away with a sledgehammer, another participant wrote, "There is no longer a middle ground. That's been seized by luxury condos. The choice is stark. We either collectively build a more combative spiritual practice, or we collude in ceding our ritual spaces of encounter to the oppressors." Okay.
All right, fair enough.
In some areas of Queens, New York, Cabbage Night has included throwing rotten fruit at neighbors, cars, and buses. Children and teenagers have fill eggs with neat and nair hair remover and throw them at unsuspecting individuals. In the mid-1980s, garbage was set on fire and cemeteries were set ablaze. In Camden, New Jersey, Mischief Night escalated to the point that the 1990s widespread arson was committed, with more than 130 arson attacks on the night of October 30th, 1991. Word of Mischief Night began to appear in U.S. newspapers in the 1930s and 1940s and told of those who were celebrating wanting to put distance between the wholesome night of trick-or-treating and the chaotic night of causing havoc around the town. Some believe that the streets of the Great Depression was causing people to act out, and this is what caused Mischief Night to break out at that time.
Oh, okay.
That's all right. I'll buy that one. You know, when things are rough, people are going to lash out in certain respects. So there you go. There is a brief but pretty detailed explanation of Mischief Night and what it entails, where it came from, and how it's, I want to say celebrated, but more like just carried out in certain areas. So
fascinating.
I remember growing up, it was always Mischief Night for us. For some of the kids in high school and middle school, when they wanted to get creepy, they'd call it Devil's Night. That's why when I watched The Crow, I'm like, oh, Devil's Night, I know what that is. Different story in Michigan out there, especially the Detroit area, but same thing. Pranks, usually harmless around this area. Some crazy stuff. I remember there was like the story of the people who would dress up a dummy and throw it off of a bridge as cars were oncoming, and cars would swerve out of the way. He's like, oh my God, it's a dead person. And trying to avoid killing a dummy or whatever the case was. Sometimes you hear the stories going a little too far where the person swerves off the road or slams into a tree, whatever the case is, and there's a car accident and or somebody gets hurt. Just crazy, creative nonsense. Mostly harmless, but sometimes can be taken a little bit too far with arson and vandalism and attacks on people. Getting attacked with nair, that's gotta suck.
Yeah, that sounds like very. I mean, like I can understand a prank or two, but that sounds kind of malevolent because that can actually cause chemical burns.
Yeah, exactly. So again, we'll see what happens. I'm surprised they didn't mention shaving cream at all.
Yeah,
that was one that used to be done back in the day. But they hit the eggs, they hit the toilet paper, they hit the soap. Those are all general practices. And then the ding dong ditch, which was always, see, that was not just for Devil's Night. That was, or Mischief Night. That was done whenever you wanted to screw with somebody. Essentially, you just go out on a night and just have fun on the weekends, or sometimes weeknights, depending if you wanted to really throw somebody off. But again, I was young when all these things were going on around me. I was not of the age to understand what was happening then. But as I grew older, I'm like, oh, you guys are just a bunch of fucking hooligans. Gotcha. All right.
Effectively, yes.
My brothers were pretty good people, but they had their outlets here and there. So I guess this was just one of them as they grew up. I would love to actually sit down. I should ask them if they could recall any of the Mischief Night stories and see what their takes on them now as they're much older.
Yeah.
But there you go. That is the last of your list for the time being, I guess, right? Unless you're going to try to fit a few other ones in, you said?
Yeah, there's a couple other ones I want to get in. We'll see what happens. I mean, I'm already kind of like over the line quite a bit, but hey, what the hell? But yeah, and next week we'll be in. Next time we record, it'll be November.
Yeah, it's gonna be
and so yeah, I'll give you the grand. We'll finish out the list and talk about any last minute additions I had to the whole thing, and talk about if we did anything on Halloween.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
I think we put a full night's work in. How do you feel?
I'm exhausted. but I also gave blood today, so I'm really tired.
Oh, Jesus, man. Why did you say that beforehand?
I don't know.
Listen, go have a cookie, have some apple juice. You'll be fine.
Yeah.
With that said, if you made it this far, thank you for listening. My name is Eric Hernandez, along with
Doug.
And we are the Rabblecast.